what would you say was the type of training you did that got you the majority of your muscle gains? The majority, not that last bit that you're maybe saying now.
The majority, I'd have to say, was that.
I saw that you had some posts like I was obviously looking through your Instagram and I saw that you had posted a picture of Mike Mentzer. Was he someone who inspired how you train early on in your career, or was that later?
Yeah, when I first came along, it was more the sort of Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates style of training that was in vogue at that time. I've also watched quite a lot of Mike Mentzer and stuff other than bodybuilding. I'm quite interested in his philosophy and stuff like that. I'm interested in Mike Mentzer. Back in the day, when I first came into bodybuilding, Dorian Yates was obviously the Mr. Olympia when I started training at about 91, 92. So those methods were what everyone was kind of following, him being Mr. Olympia at the time. So that would be how I trained in the early 90s. That obviously evolved.
How did it evolve?
I trained like that for probably a very long time, probably a good 10, 20 years. It was all about heavy duty style training. And if you go back to the Brawn articles in Flex magazine, it was all about to grow, you must get stronger. So everything was geared around high intensity and trying to get strong in the gym. Don't know now if I would say that that's correct, but that was how I trained back then. I got a certain amount of results from it. I don't think I would repeat it if I had the time back, but that was how I trained then. Really pretty heavy intensity techniques, drop sets, supersets, negatives, low volume, train body parts once a week. I don't know if you read the old Brawn articles, the Stuart McCulloch Brawn articles. That was in the Flex magazines when I was coming up, so just kind of followed that religiously.
So you were doing like the one set to failure with some intensity techniques added to it. Is that kind of how it was? One set per exercise to failure?
Well, there'd be warm-ups, pyramiding up, and then one kind of all-out set to failure.
How long did you run that for?
I reckon that was for about 10, 15 years at least. I
Wow.
was training like that. Well, I obviously went through the beginner stages. So I joined a gym and you used to get a program given to you. I trained whole body probably to begin with. The first year or so, it was like whole body. And then it was like just getting right into the nitty gritties of the kind of heavy duty style training along the lines of Mike Mentzer and Dorian Yates style training.
So what made you switch? Like obviously it's clear from what you're describing that your philosophy on how you train is different now than it was prior. And you even said that if you were to go back in time, maybe you wouldn't have trained like that for that long. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, just the current science and actually having implemented it, like the fact that I got better gains when I was older and probably wasn't as receptive to gaining when I started trying to train with a bit more volume and more frequency. The fact that I got gains and like by implementing that, I should have got better gains when I was younger, but I actually got better gains when I was older, when I changed my training style.
Interesting. Was your nutrition still on point like when you were younger? Like, could you account that difference in muscular growth to anything else other than the training? Or do you think, no, the nutrition was on point and even like the recovery, like sleep, etc.?
My nutrition was pretty much good from because I was competing when I was younger. Maybe I'd competed too often when I was younger, but my nutrition was pretty much on point. Obviously, supplements and stuff got better as time went on. And obviously, back when I was younger, I maybe couldn't afford to use everything I would want to use supplement wise, but my nutrition was pretty good. Like I always got my protein in and I ate my 6 meals a day. And I wouldn't say my nutrition's changed all that much other than I don't bulk like I used to bulk.
So you mentioned that you actually saw more growth later on in your career. How do you know it was growth and not, oh, you were actually just leaner? Like, did you compare, for example, for the listeners, right, who may not know, would you compare like how you looked at a certain body weight and that was your kind of measuring tool, if you will? Like, for example,
Um,
I'll give you an example just so it's super clear. Like, for me, it's like, okay, 180 pounds now versus 180 pounds 5 years ago, that's a different look for me. So then I could say,
mhm,
okay, I'm leaner at 180 pounds now than I was 5 years ago, where I looked bloated and I had excess body fat. Well, then I clearly made gains. Is that how
mhm.
you're measuring it?
I could probably just go and scale weight because I was pretty
Oh,
lean. I was a junior, and my actual increases in body weight on the scale got heavier as I got older because I was always pretty shredded on stage. So I actually got probably more shredded as I was older and I learned, but my stage weight went up, not by
wow.
huge amounts, but it went up. And that's when I started changing my training. Obviously, I was more focused as well, more getting to the stage where I'm at national and international levels. And there's a lot of factors, but I trained more often, more frequently, and with more volume. And my stage weight did go up a bit. And I was always pretty shredded, even as a junior, even like going back to like the first time I was truly shredded was in 1998. Probably the reason I placed as high was because it was shredded and other guys were a bit softer. They were bigger, but I was leaner. So it's just really going up in scale weight is how I can really measure it, because the condition was always there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, first of all. And it's basically the same thing, just you have the contest stage weight to compare, but it's pretty much the same thing. You saw, oh, I'm actually heavier. I look more muscular. Maybe I'm leaner, but at a heavier weight on stage.
Yes.
Okay.
Not massively. You're talking a couple of kilo, but that's
good.
Quite a lot in someone with a small frame like mine.
Yeah. So what would you say was that difference? Just out of curiosity, like what was your stage weight before and then the after? Because you said a couple kilos, so I'm curious.
Yeah, probably 65 when I was younger, and maybe I've competed as heavy as 68, 69. Maybe not peak condition, so probably peak condition heaviest is about 67 is probably my heaviest stage weight while being shredded and full and everything. So going from about 64, 65 to about 67. Nice. But that's over the course of about 3 decades. So
yeah. But that makes a difference. I mean, we're talking there like 6 to 10 pounds potentially, if I'm doing my math right there. But yeah, that's a big difference, right? I know you guys use stone, right, in the UK?
More so kilo now, but I still use pounds.
But you know, you would think you guys would use pounds since, like, for your currency, it's pounds, right? So you would be like, okay, so let's just use pounds for the scale weight and all that as well. But you guys seem to have complicated it.
That's all mixed up. That's all mixed up.
All right. So, okay, cool. So when you did the high intensity training, 10 years or so, like you mentioned, 10, 15 years, for the listeners who are curious, and then we'll get into how you transitioned to where it's at now. Was that the type of training you were doing leading up to the amateur WNBF Worlds? You did win the amateur WNBF Worlds, and then you competed as a pro. You won the pro international lightweight title as well. But is that the type of training you did leading up to then, or did you had already evolved it?
No, it was changed, but I reckon about midway to 2012, 13, then I started kind of training with higher volume.
So what would you say was the type of training you did that got you the majority of your muscle gains? The majority, not that last bit that you're maybe saying now.
The majority, I'd have to say, was the high intensity, but I would say the higher volume was better because of the amount of gains I got later in life. So the majority of the gains came from high intensity, but I think I could have got there sooner had I been training the way I am now.
Let's talk about that. So what did that look like? Give a sample. Let's talk about before you transitioned and then you started competing when you won the amateur worlds. And we're talking before then. So we're talking the high intensity training. You transitioned from full body 3 days a week.
So that was more like my beginner phase when I first started training. Just for about 6 months, it was just work through some programs given to me, just everything, whole body, 3 days a week. And then transitioned out to a kind of split routine. And then after that, it was same sort of idea. Chest, shoulders, tricep, back, bicep, legs, and just hit body parts once every week. And then that was like the high intensity method. So go in, do like a kind of general warm up, and then pyramid up, but not really count them. None of those sets would be really counted. I'm just pyramiding up in weights. Like say I was doing a bench press, I would do maybe empty bar, then I'd add a plate, and then add half a plate, and then go all out with something like 2 and a bit plates, and then get a spot, and then maybe do some negatives, and then move on to something like flies. Probably not needing as many pyramiding because I'm already warmed up at that stage, and then just doing the same sort of thing, maybe with a slightly higher rep range on the isolation exercises. So maybe like 3-4 working sets for something like chest. Not really a great deal of volume, probably not enough volume with the benefit of hindsight, but that was how I trained then.
And these were, again, for the listeners, to absolute failure. You were not able to complete another rep.
Yeah, just total failure, shaking, then getting a spotter to do 4th reps and then negatives and just all sorts of crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would never train like that now. I could probably injure myself nowadays trying to train like that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because you're in your 50s now, Stuart, or 40s?
I'm 46.
Okay, so you're approaching that 50 mark. You're not there yet. You got a
Yeah,
few,
no.
got 4 years. Yeah, you're still a young guy. So, and before we get into that, let's stay on this high intensity stuff. There's more to unpack here. I'm curious about. So you were talking about 3 to 4 working sets per week.
Yeah.
That's not a lot for the listeners who, yeah, they would probably say, yeah, that doesn't seem like a lot compared to maybe what most are doing, especially at the pro level, right?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't at pro level at that stage. I'm talking about early 2000s. That would be how I would train. My teens and 20s training would probably look like just pure intensity.
And that was 3 days a week.
3 days a week, maybe 4. Sometimes I found like I would do 4 days. Like sometimes doing chest, shoulders, and triceps was too much for one workout. I'd maybe do like a split of like shoulders and triceps and do chest itself one day. Body parts would only be hit once a week at that point.
But that is interesting that you felt like to you it was too much, 3 to 4 working sets, because these were really high intensity. Like you mentioned, you were doing like drop sets, negatives, like you would just extend the set beyond concentric failure.
Yeah, just crazy intensity. Just if you watch the Blood and Guts video with Dorian Yates, the black and white one, that would be similar to that, because that's what I was brought up on in the magazines at the time.
Sure. And were these, what's the way I want to put this? Heavy progressive sets week after week? Like, would you try to add more weight on the bar? Or I used on the bar as a general thing, but like more weight on the machine you're using or whatever it is you were using week after week, or more reps, something where you were progressing?
If I could, I would try and increase it where I could. I would try and add maybe little plates, little small plates, the smallest plates I could get, the 1.25 in my gym, and just try and add little plates. But even if I was adding plates and getting more reps, I would still keep the negatives and 4th reps and everything all in anyway, just because I thought you had to. I was getting up to some pretty heavy weights, but still keeping in all the intensity techniques. Not every set, but most sets.
And how was the rep range for the most part? Was it pretty low or?
Low reps. I'd be low reps in the compound lifts, and I would try and up the reps in the like flies or something like that, or crossovers or whatever I was doing, leg extensions.
So you would get like, for example, you were doing like, I don't know, bench press or whatnot. You would keep it to low reps. What would that look like? What, 4 to 8, 4 to 6?
Yeah, between 4 and 8.
Okay. And then you would extend the set with like, let's just say drop sets or rest pause. So technically the reps would kind of creep up to maybe what, 10, 12 potentially?
No, I'd probably increase the weight by the time it got as high as that on a bench press. So I'd maybe do 6, and then my spotter would give me like 2 4th reps. And then if I was getting 8, then I would probably increase the weight a little bit so that it's pushing me back to 5 reps.
With no rest?
No, I would rest between.
Oh, okay.
Between sets, I would have a rest, but I would always put in intensity techniques just to try and take it beyond failure. Not every workout, but most workouts, there would be some intensity techniques. Probably weren't necessary, but they were in there. Yeah.
And it's cool because I want to obviously just give the listeners an idea of how you did things before so they can understand where you are now, right? So that's why I want to dive into it a little bit deeper. So with the intensity techniques, like you did, okay, let's break it down. You had drop sets, rest pause, 4th reps, negatives. Were you doing that as well?
Sometimes, not all that often. I use drop sets quite a lot. That would be something I may do like in my flies or something like that. I tended to use 4th reps on the compounds, getting a spot, and then on the isolation work, I would probably do double or triple drop sets typically.
Okay.
And then throw in some negatives or stuff now and again.
And that was the last set you would do that, obviously. So your working set, that's when you would start to do these types of techniques.
Yeah.
Was that on every exercise, by the way? You would do some sort of intensity technique on every single exercise for the most part?
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah, so that's wild. Yeah, for sure. Let's give an example. Okay, you worked up to your all-out bench press. It's your working set. You hit 6 reps to failure. What do you do? Well, give us a sample. How does that look after that?
So I'll be at 6 reps. I've completed the reps without a spotter. I'll be sort of struggling with it. I try to get it on my own till I come to the point where I'm shaking and I literally can't move it. And then they'll give me like a couple of finger touches just to let me complete the rep. And then I'll do another one where the spotter's taking a bit more of the weight, and then I would just rack it. So then I might move on to something like incline flies or something like that and start with a heavy weight, maybe 8 reps or something, drop it down to maybe about 60-70% of that weight and just keep repping and drop it down again.
So you might get like upwards of 30 reps potentially with different loads, of course, in a drop set sequence. Yeah.
Maybe not that high, maybe 20, 25 I might get, but I could go as high as 30.
Interesting. Yeah,
depending on what weight I select.
Right. The drop sets can be a nightmare, like in terms of just having to keep repping.
And sometimes by the time you've put down the dumbbells, you've actually rested a bit. So it's almost like you're starting another set again almost. So it can be quite difficult. It's good if you've got a spotter to just quickly change a pin or something like that so that it's almost one continuous set. But there's obviously going to be a little bit of stopping in there. It just gives you time to rest a little bit.
And when did you stop that? So you did it through your teenage years and your 20s, you would say, maybe early 30s?
Yeah. Very early 30s. And then I just started just reading more and just like I'd plateaued and I just fancied trying something different just to see if I could kickstart my gains again.